to look underneath them here. Well, welcome everyone. We're expecting a dazzling presentation from Virginia Rettig, and so I thought I would, since I got these things for last week, I thought I'd wear them again today. No, just kidding. Well, I don't know how many of you had a chance to see the eclipse, but I got to see a little of it. The clouds parted just a little bit, and I could definitely see the edge of the moon going over the sun. So I was pretty happy about that. And it's going to be a little while till the next one. So I'm glad I got that done. Welcome everyone. Those who don't know me, my name is Rick Bushnell, and I'm a past president of the Foundation of the Arts and Sciences and currently chair the Environmental Stewardship Committee. And we're joined by another member of the Environmental Stewardship Committee, Darlene Cavalier, who many of you have met before on various sessions, and she's here with us today, and she'll be helping us link some of the things that we're learning today about the science projects, citizen science projects that you may want to get involved in. So I just want to welcome everyone. And again, thank the Foundation of the Arts and Sciences for hosting these and providing these. As I've said in the past, without them, we don't have a forum, and it costs money to produce these things. So I encourage people to please help the foundation. It is a nonprofit organization, so if you can make donations or join and become a member or support it by attending some of the various wonderful sessions that they have. And I think it's probably a week or two, when's Memorial Day? The catalog will be out for all the activity for next season. So we want to thank Jenna, who arranges and is online with us today, and Daniela Kerner, who's the executive director, who makes all these things possible. So the premise, of course, of Science Saturdays is everything is connected. And when we have presentations like today's, it enables us to see opportunities to get out into the wild and see how everything is connected, and then bring it back home and see even further. And our real goal, of course, is to provide good fact-based information and education so that when people do discuss environmental issues, they've got some real background, and they've got resources where they can go and look things up and find facts to answer questions and one thing or another. So that's really it. And as I remind people, stewardship is, to me, really where science and art and technology and the love of knowledge all come together. And the founder of the foundation, a guy named Boris Bly, said that art and science have a similar wellspring, and that is, it all starts with observation. So the more knowledge we have, the more keenly we can observe nature and enjoy it, and then we want to care for it, and that's what stewardship's all about. So that's really kind of my little starting. We're fortunate today. We're going to have a presentation about protecting marsh and saving birds at the Edwin Forsythe National Refuge. And our speaker is Virginia Rettig, who has a great background. And although she went to college in different places, she did wind up working at Cape May, and she was there for about 4 years, and then moved north, and then ultimately took over things at excuse me, at Edwin Forsythe. So she's got a lot of background. She's been like 20 years on the East Coast. So she's got a good handle on what things are going on here. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce her. I am going to add one thing, and that is that Virginia and I over the years have talked many times about this education and the need for outreach and the wonderful things to see around here. A couple of years ago, she was kind of a driving force in starting a thing called the LBI Conservation Coalition. And that is all these various groups, Alliance for a Living Ocean, Reclaim the Bay, certainly Forsythe, and some of the taxpayers associations all getting together to encourage people to learn more, and then providing a kind of an integrated calendar of all the different things and places that you can learn things. So from the foundation or Reclaim the Bay, you'll be hearing more about those places to go and see during the summer when we can get out and really enjoy nature. So without further ado, Virginia, I'll turn things over to you.
Great. Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here. I wore my new summery, springy palm tree shirt in honor of being on the island today, virtually anyway. So, and you'll see behind me some amazing work. One of our Fish and Wildlife Service employees in our regional office, he's based in New York, works at a National Wildlife Refuge, did a huge mural. And one of the things he did was a salt marsh sparrow, which we'll be talking about today. And they made some little backgrounds for us. So I just had to brag about this amazing artwork. So today I'm going to launch here in a second, but I'm going to talk about Forsythe National Wildlife Refuge. It is a federal property. Give you some background around that, but I really want to dive into some of the work that we've been doing and also talking a bit about migratory birds and kind of bringing it down to what you all can do. So you're going to get an assignment at the end. I will say that I did chase the eclipse. I am from Buffalo originally, so the plan was we're going to Buffalo. And then we got up there, stayed with friends in Rochester, and it was going to be so cloudy that we bailed and we drove all the way up to the Adirondacks and saw it up there, and it was amazing. And we were in totality for 3 minutes, and no one in sight. It was gorgeous, gorgeous. And it was fun because I spent some of my college years in the Adirondack. So it was really nice to come full circle and now kind of come back here, sit in this chair today and talk about what I do every day. So it's just really inspiring. And I hope you all were able to take some joy from the experience that you had, whether it was here or somewhere in totality. So I'm going to just confirm from Rick that you're seeing the full screen of my talk.
You got it.
Awesome. So yes, thanks. So this is basically what I want to talk about today. It is protecting marsh and saving birds. So, a lot of times we get into these talks about, what can I do at the refuge, or, what can I see? And today I really want to talk about kind of what we're doing. So we're going to hit a couple of things. And I don't, of course, now see you all. I see some of you, but I'm hoping that you all have visited at least one part of Forsythe Refuge. We'll really cover the coastline for 50 miles. But these photographs here, the left is the federally endangered red knot, and that was just listed on the endangered species list a couple of years ago. And then, of course, you see an illustration of a dead bird hitting essentially a window. So we're going to kind of talk about how we can be doing more for wildlife.
And while you're drawing your breath there for a second, I'll remind people to use the chat session. If you do have questions, I'll be monitoring chat and we'll entertain questions perhaps along the way, but certainly at the end.
That's great. And I cannot see the chat, so please do.
Yes.
I usually have 2 screens at the office, and today I'm home. Hopefully my dog won't bark, but we'll hang in there. He's being a good sleepy boy right now. So this is the whole run of Edwin B. Forsythe National Wildlife Refuge. And essentially, what we have here is, whoopsie, go back one, is these lands. Refuge started way down there in Oceanville back in 1939. And we actually just celebrated 80 years right before COVID. So we were happy to get that in. And then you can see we actually go all the way up to Brick Township to the DeCamp Trail. But a lot of the main work we do is down near Oceanville in terms of visitation. But a lot of the marsh work, the restoration we're doing, is actually farther north. So this is something that we use this is kind of the beginning of how we all figured out what habitat we had and where it was. And this was a lot of work that was done years ago to essentially identify the habitat. So you can see here that there's a couple of greens that sort of dominate the Forsythe Refuge property. The limey, kind of brighter green, that's all of our salt marsh. So we have 32,000 acres of salt marsh on Forsythe Refuge. That more olive, darker green is the forest. It's about 17% habitat, and it's kind of wet upland, a kind of intermingled habitat. But as you can see, we have quite a bit of salt marsh, which is really critical. And so with that 32,000 acres, as you get into the different types of salt marshes that we have, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, there's certainly different species that dominate different types of salt marsh. And what those species are depends on how often and for how long they're inundated with tidal water. So when we at Forsythe are very interested in doing what we can to improve and restore and make more high marsh. This high marsh being the marsh that is flooded just twice a month, not twice a day, like a lot of the marsh we think of as we're out and about in our boats and enjoying habitat. And so, you know, we have 6,000 acres of that 32 is high marsh, and it ends up being very critical for the bird behind me. So I do want to talk, since this is a science Saturday, I get to get in the weeds a little bit. And so basically what we look at is when we have salt marsh is two typical components. You have the smooth cord grass and you have the salt hay. And they're both Spartina genus, but they're different species, of course. So what we end up doing, and instead of calling things smooth cord grass or salt hay, we call them alterniflora and patens. Like we all do in anything we do, we go right down to the chase. And so you can see they're very different species by the look of them. The alterniflora on the left is very straight, stands, and it's actually the salt marsh, or the part of the salt, it grows, I should say, in the part of the marsh where it gets flooded twice a day. So it's very, very wet, and it's the lower marsh because it has a lower elevation generally, and it gets flooded twice a day. The patens, the salt hay, is actually a very short type of grass, and you can see it gets this really cool, like a tornado went through, you know, and it's like a bed, and you lay on it, which I have done, and it's just soft and it's a little prickly, but it's just a wonderful thing. And so salt hay has a very long story associated with it. As a farming vegetation. And we might hit some of that, but I just wanted to kind of show you. So that salt hay actually grows at higher elevations, and it doesn't want to be wet all the time like alterniflora does, and it only is flooded about twice a month. And or when there's extreme high tides, which of course lately, if you've looked out your window, it feels like it's every day, twice a day. But that all said, that's a piece of the puzzle for us as well. So I just wanted to give you a little background that for us, we want to manage high marsh. We want Peyton's marsh, salt hay marsh, because that's where these species are. You know, the species that, you know, the grass that gets inundated twice a day isn't going to be raising birds. The salt hay, the high marsh that gets inundated twice a month is the one where we want to focus our energy, because that's where our species of importance are. However, you can go throughout the marsh and see them intermingling. And there's lots, it's not like this and this, it's more like intermingling, but salt hay meadows are very unique. So at Forsythe, we're essentially, I want to click on this. I want to go to, sorry for that, but I want to get rid of this bar that's right in my face, and I don't know how to do that. Oh, well. So I can't even read the title of my slide, but anyway. That's okay. So we have two species that are really important that we're managing for with the salt marsh right now. So Eastern Black Rail is on the left, and this species was just listed last year or the year before as threatened under the Endangered Species Act, and that's because they are dwindling. So that's an important species for us. The species on the right is that salt marsh sparrow that's behind me. And this species is not yet listed, but it's probably going to be soon. And so this species is really the one we're doing a lot of work towards getting into its, you know, doing habitat work for it. All right. And there. All right. So the cool thing about salt marsh sparrow is, so black rails do have a distribution. They go all the way down to the south. They go up north. So they're important to us, and we'll do what we can for them, hopefully. But the salt marsh sparrow is the one we really focus on, because 37% of the whole global population is in New Jersey. And so if they're in a certain habitat, like that 6,000 acres, that's 70% of high marsh that we have at the refuge, that's where they nest. And so all of a sudden you start looking at what habitat is out there, where the salt marsh sparrows are breeding, and you're looking square at Forsythe Refuge. And we are definitely ground zero for this species in the world. So this is just a little bit more, again, this being science, I wanted to dig a little deeper and show you some facts and figures. This gives you a bit of a distribution of our high marsh, right? So for instance, where it's really orange on there and then getting in dark red, it shows you that it's more intense there, but you can see these losses. So for instance, if you go across and down the shore, you can see that northern part has lost 60%. We've lost almost 70%. And you just kind of keep going down. As you get into the Mullica River estuary, we've actually lost a lot less. Oh, I wonder why. It's the most naturally functioning estuary on the East Coast. And then as you get into the Cape May areas, also lost quite a bit. You can see this is that whole Tuckahoe area, right? So a lot of facts and figures here, but just demonstrating to you that we've just had a huge loss of high marsh, and it's essentially been converting to either the alternate flora or open water, which is even worse than alternate flora, of course. But that's sort of the natural progression as species get, as the vegetation gets more and more flooded from sea level rise. We also know that the Jersey coast is sinking, so we have to worry about that as well. So lots of things going on there. This just kind of then gives you a kind of a feel for like where we are in the world here. So you see all that salt marsh again is out there throughout the refuge. So we've done a couple of things to try to start understanding what we can do to combat these losses of habitat. And so this was back a couple of years ago when we worked with New Jersey Department of Transportation, and they actually did a couple of things for us at Good Luck Point. So this is Berkeley Township, and this was a dredging project that they did, and they pulled in the material, and this particular material happened to be more sandy. And so we said, hey, why don't we put it along do an open water application and put it right along the beach. So this area, and I can go back and show you that where we are here, right here, Good Luck Point, okay? And so this area, as much as there are a few areas, I would say, on Barnegat Bay, we actually have a little bit of sandy beach before you hit the marsh. And so this was one of those areas, and having that sandy beach before the marsh starts is a nice buffer, and it breaks down velocity of the water. So this was an application that we worked on, and we learned a few things about it. You can see that before you kind of had a strip, and this was pretty deep open water. And this is after, so you can see here some stayed. We had a midway, we had a storm, so the material in the middle just got sucked down to the bottom. But when you go and look at the waves, and you see that there's actually less of the waves have been attenuated, and they're really slowing down. To do this again, we decided we would just dump all the material up at the tip and then just let it flow down as it would into the water column. So if we have an opportunity to do that project again, that's what we would do. And so that was great. Then the other piece of the project was actually placing material on the marsh. And so this actually shows you where we had done that open water placement. And when you look at this site here at Good Luck Point, you can see, Bay Avenue here divides it, and it creates a real bottleneck for water flow on this tidal environment. So even though this has ditches and it has some open ponding that's begun, this marsh here you can see clearly functions better, because there are no hydrological impediments other than sort of these typical ones we may see. But if you look at the marsh here, all the ditching that occurred and then the restrictions of the tide, not only to let water in, but once it gets in, and if anyone's been on this road, it gets in because it overtops that road all the time, especially this last winter. So that water gets in here, but it can't get out because the connections through the road are not big enough. And the road's too low. So water's going to get in. Doesn't matter if you have a culvert, it's stuck in there. So our approach was to get a Corps of Engineers permit and do all that stuff and place sediment from a dredging project onto the marsh. And if you look at this picture here, you can see where we placed it. And it's this just about 4 acres of placement here. And the idea there is to get that elevation up. You hope that the vegetation will recruit. We have not been planting these yet. And just observe. And so this is because this marsh is in such horrible condition, we were able to kind of use this as a learning laboratory as well. And we've done quite a few things at this site. So this was actually the upper left-hand corner is during placement. You see a lot of open water there, and that pipe running through is just the pipe that's sending the material from the dredged areas, the dredged channels onto the refuge. And the following summer, you can see that, you do have some sand and silt in here. It got a little sandy, but, that's what we learned. We actually had these logs here filled with wood chips. And in the end, we realized that they really served no purpose. And we've all kind of been talking about how really, other than sort of putting something in a ditch to stop water flowing through, we're generally just sort of allowing the sites that receive dredge material to to just sort of take it and say, let's let it figure out what it's going to do with that material. So we ended up cutting these all open like the next year and letting all the wood chips out and got as much of that material out of there as we could. Right after placement, this is 2020, you can see we had our staff go out and we actually use very high resolution GIS data and GPSing to mark the spots, mark a series of spots. So you can see the sediment in here that was placed and it looks pretty great. What we don't ever want to do is when we have spots on the marsh that we measure, we don't want to step where the marsh is going to be measured because we were checking for elevation. So this employee is standing on a bleacher and we'll keep going back to that site over the years, but we'll never step right there where that data was taken. So you can see Bay Ave behind you there. So the next year you can see here, this is 22 now, right? So this is the second summer and you can really see where you had open areas of filling in of vegetation. And in this picture, you can actually see both of those two species that we talked about earlier. You can see the alterniflora and some disticlus in here. It's probably might be mostly disticlus. And then you actually have that salte or that patens right here. This looks kind of like alterniflora. So a variety of marsh grasses filling in on their own. Like I said, we had not yet at this point done any planting. And this just goes to show you, so after that 2 summers, this is just a different angle. You can see the pre-existing vegetation. We did some, well, so what happened is we let natural recruitment, but we also did some experimenting. So as a project, we didn't like plant everything, but we did some testing to see, okay, if we did some planting, what would it look like and how are plants going to, how are they going to survive? So what we found out is this on the left here is the pre-existing marsh. That veg was there. It didn't get covered with any kind of mud. Here we had mud and we planted it. And then this is what happened naturally, just recruitment. This is pretty much alterniflora recruiting itself. What happened here is that none of the patens from the left went over and invaded, nor did any of the patens we planted survive. And that was really alarming because here we are doing all these projects, spending millions of dollars on salt marsh projects, and we are not getting our target vegetation, which is the salt hay, the patens. What we have is the alterniflora. Again, that's great, but that's not what the salt marsh sparrow is going to nest in. And so that got our biologist, Dr. Joe Smith, thinking a little bit more about, wait a minute, what is this material that we're putting in the marsh that's just dredge material? And is it really what our target species, the patens, wants? Of course, the answer is no. So we had some soil scientists come out and we did these cores in this marsh. So everyone here is looking around, looking at this core through this boring kind of drill. And when you pull out the core, you can look at it. And so the normal marsh, this is just in a normal healthy marsh, you can see all that peat material on the top, like 2 feet of it. And that's all the old marsh grass. So marsh grass just keeps, it's not a garden, right? We don't go out and clean up the marsh and get all the vegetation out of there every summer. We let the marsh grass die down, the new stuff grows up, and then it just keeps compacting. And that peat, that rich organic material is what allows the marsh grasses to thrive. And so you can see the silt and sand, this is all a natural situation here on the right, is way on the bottom. So when we do a marsh project, that actually gets flipped. Now we've covered all the peat and we have the silt and sand on top, but that's not where the vegetation grows. So last summer, actually the summer before 2022, Joe Smith did a little experiment. And this is when science is really fun because it's like, we're doing these $1 million projects and here we are in the marsh with our little tubs of vegetation and soil. So what he did is he got these cloth little tubs here and he set them in the site at Berkeley in the water at elevation that we would want them to be if we were going to lay more material down. And so he got just silt from the tidal channel where we had done the work, and we had some material in there from the dredging. He got a little bit different upland, kind of sandy soil from, you know, just like a forested upland area or some kind of upland area that's a little bit richer. And then he got compost from the Cape May County Municipal Recycling Center, their area there, what they have. I want to just call it the dump because that's what we call it down here, but we went to the dump and got compost. And the folks there have been fabulous. So he planted a bunch of these pots in series around the marsh. And then through the summer, looked at how they did. And as you can see here, after a couple, you know, this is the fall. Look at the salt marsh grasses are flowering, right? So now we're like August, September. And you can see that the vegetation in the tidal channel bucket did terrible. And that's what we were trying to plant marsh in, whereas the material in the compost did great and thrived. And then Joe just kept talking to people and got to thinking. And so you can even see here, just another view of this is how much growth you had. And then of course, to be thorough, what you need to understand is what did the roots look like, because it's all about the roots really. And what we found after painstakingly going through all these samples and measuring root mass of all these samples, that the root masses in the composted material was way richer, you know, was way stronger, was more voluminous, and matched the growth overhead. So back to our story, right? So now we know what our salt hay, and I put a star on there because that's what we want, is we want salt hay. And that's the habitat that we want to be creating for our marshes. So this is the kind of the data, right? That essentially we place this material. So here's our alternate flora, right? That is the one that I, just to go back, don't want to beat you, don't want to beat a dead horse, but this is alternate flora, this is salt hay. So this is a graph for the alternate flora and the 3 different types of substrate. And as you can see, the alternate flora did kind of okay in all of them. It did kind of okay in dredge silt, not as great as in compost, but still it was fine. And that's what we see on these dredge projects. We see that the species that come in is the alternate flora. Now, it doesn't mean that someday the patons, the salt hay may not come in, but we don't have time. We need to get these projects moving. We can't wait 7-10 years for Peyton's to make up its mind if it's going to like the site. You know, this is a real urgency here. So we're really trying to see if we can speed up. And so here you can see the data around what I just showed you visually for the Peyton's, the salt hay is, you know, similar to upland sand, but that's not reality. We're not, you know, digging sand quarries and dumping these, you know, soil quarries and dumping the material on the marshes. You know, what we have accessible is dredged silt. And as you can see, for the marshes that we want to we want to you need to have something more organic than dredged silt. Now, the dredged silt is important. I don't want you to go thinking Virginia said, no, we can't do any more salt marsh projects with dredged material. What we need the dredge material for is to get the elevation, and that's critical. But then we believe that you now then have to go back after that, and you need to add something more to the pot to make it a more appetizing palette for the salt hay. So this is just a follow on. This was last summer. So Joe went back to the Ocean County MUA folks recycling center, and he got just a couple, this is just like 2 truckloads of compost, and he literally dumped it off the side of the road with the crew, right out the trucks, right off Bay Avenue, right on top of the marsh, put down this core batting, put down some wooden stakes, there's some other pins in there, everything will deteriorate and decline. He had a little tiny piece of marsh here he tied into, and this was on May 22nd. And here there are plants. You can see that the plants, the Spartina Peyton's plants are in there. And then just the progression, I bet you all can guess what happened. This was June. Okay, all right. A little bit later in June, we're greening up. July's looking pretty good. July 21st, looking better. August 1st, August 9th. 17th, this is when will it stop? This was a field trip we had showing off our newest piece of marsh in New Jersey in August 17th. And then here you are in September with fully flowering Spartina Peytons in 4 months. And that's what we want. This is what we want. So basically, this is demonstrating to us that we now can get them to the marsh we want. We just have to figure out how to do it in a way that's going to be feasible on a lot of different fronts. And of course, now this year we went back out, looked, it's all there. We see some roots underground. We're really excited about it. So I've been claiming this is the newest marsh in New Jersey, and it's pretty exciting stuff. And I walk on it every once in a while, and Joe has a heart attack. I'm like, look, you can walk on it. And he's like, no, don't walk on my marsh. But if you want to go, you can drive by and see our marsh. But I do encourage you to go by Good Luck Point, because we just did this project here. This project this is a visual of what we intended to do, and in the end, this is what we ended up doing. So we had two sites here. The one there on the northern end shows you that area where we had done the sediment placement. The one down south is a control, but all the little orange squares are compost. So Joe went back to the Ocean County MUA, and I wish I had the names of the gentlemen that were so helpful. I apologize for being remiss and not being able to say who they were to give them credit, because they've done they've been so incredibly helpful. They basically said to us, how much compost do you want? And they delivered it to us essentially. I can't remember if it was here or here, but somewhere along the road, they dumped it all out. I think it's right here. And we hired a contractor who has an airboat with a bucket on the side. So basically they dumped, the Ocean County dumped all the compost, and then the airboat crew came in about a week, or maybe not even a week, but about a week maybe, took the bucket. They had a bucket, dumped it into the airboat, and the airboat went out and would dump the bucket. So basically in these little piles. And then we had volunteers out there, because we had the stakes in the water to get the elevation we want. And so now we basically have a whole bunch of compost piles on top of this marsh, both where we had put the sediment before a couple years ago and where we haven't. And so I'm going to go back. I don't have an updated picture of that because it just happened, but we're really excited about it. I strongly encourage you to go out to, if I might have a picture, but I'm wondering, I don't think I do. Anyway, go out there, go on Long Bay Shore, and now you're going to see. So we've gone back and put all the core material on top, staked it all down, and we're actually going to plant it Monday. So it's this really hot research. And I do want to mention, so there's more, there's more too, but let me pause because that was a lot of information. And I just want to see Rick, and I do want to be mindful of time. Are there any questions? Because I'm going to shift gears a little bit and get away from this specific project.
I have a couple of questions. Maybe
no guests first.
I'm waiting for guests, but maybe while they're formulating their ideas.
Okay. Yeah. What you got?
Down. Are you familiar with the oyster restoration efforts that went out on Good Luck Point? Both Reclaim the Bay and the Lateral Society were working on, and I mentioned that just as so that's the water side of the equation to the more upland side. And I just didn't know, as much as I've talked to you, I never talked to you about that. I'm learning so much from this. This is great.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of those, and it's great. And you're totally right. It all ties together.
Then the other thing was, you mentioned volunteers a couple different times. I imagine some of the people on the call today would be interested in volunteering. How do they, and then you mentioned field trips. Can they find that out at your website, or where can they find that information?
Yeah, probably. We're very limited on what we do although I will say, and we could potentially do a field trip for LBIF out here. That would be fun to talk a little bit more, get Joe out there and set that up. That would be probably the best way. We've been very careful on volunteering. And actually, well, not careful. What I would say is this work is not easy. It is really, really hard. And not that volunteers can't do it, but it's such an experiment that we've really been actually providing the quote unquote volunteering opportunities to the other scientists that we've been working on with in New Jersey and other places, other national wildlife refuges, because we're really trying to send the message to the people that can make the change on the ground that this is doable, and we want them to be a part of it so that we can see more of this kind of innovation in other places. So that's been our focus for now in terms of getting, kind of help out there. And I will say it is hard, and it can be hard for us to use volunteers for biology projects. What I'm hoping is, if once we kind of get our stride here, there will be more opportunities for that kind of thing. But I think a field trip out here would be completely doable, and I'd love to set that up with you.
That's great. And of course, the foundation has 20 acres of marsh out there. We did get a question in here. Can you provide your email? I'm working on a Spartina Payton's wetland restoration project on my private property that borders the reserve and would like to follow up.
You got it.
Oh, there's the email address. Okay. And so I'm going to take you up. I'd love to do a field trip out onto that marsh. That'd be more of a fall thing.
Anytime. I think it'd be fun to go out maybe like August or September, only because that's when the Paytons will be blooming, and you'll be able to see the results of this experiment. It'd be a follow-on to like, okay, how did the planting go? How did it do now that we've this is 200 piles of compost with 4,000, it's going to be 4,000 Payton's plants we're putting in this week. And so it really is going to it's the next step. How is it going to happen? What's going to happen?
That's great. And then another question I had, what is the county, would the county be able to supply compost at some scale, I mean,
yes.
Talk about the ultimate recycling. I'm just thinking,
yep.
all the sludge and stuff that they come up with and have this is.
Yep. The sludge is another thing that is a potential out there. The thing is that we still need the dredge because we got to get the elevation, and the compost now has become this commodity, right? This very valuable commodity. So we don't want to just be throwing it when it's not going to do the job we're looking for. That's another piece of what we're learning, but they make it sound like it's a nonstop flow of compost. So we'll see how that goes, but they've been great.
And I think that's an excellent point about needing the called dredge material for elevation, because as you and I know, there are many of those who are very worried about the dredge material, but when it's purely being used for providing elevation where it's not going to be at the surface, it's by design going to be beneath the surface.
It's true.
It's an interesting point. Okay, let's see. Darlene mentioned that volunteers can be trained to do steps and process data collection. And analysis.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of where it is. It's like, it's really hard for us as federal employees to often make space for volunteers to come in because we're just stressed out. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm so stressed about my work life. So to sit down and like figure out a way, because if a volunteer is going to go on a government computer, they need a PIV card and they have to be background checked, and it's just like painful. So I definitely see and hear that, but we often do better having volunteers do more like public outreach work in the visitor center, because it doesn't require as much work to get them up and running.
And you're definitely not alone with
frustrating.
that.
Right.
But there are thousands of scientists who work for the government who work with volunteers. So I don't know any volunteers who actually touch a government database. We'll help you with that when you're ready.
Right.
Cool.
So
okay.
I'm gonna jump a little bit forward. This is just throwing in this slide to show that we recently got 2 $5 million awards, and I will say but the work's going to be done on refuge, but this $5 million went to Brick Township, so we're going to be using dredge material to fill these areas with sediment, and then we're already designing to like what comes after the sediment, so that's pretty exciting stuff for us. And then and this is already permitted. We actually designed this with Hurricane Sandy money after the storm. And now we've just kind of been waiting around for money to come, and bam, here comes money. So always be prepared. And then this is another project we're working on. We haven't even got a permit on this yet, but just wanted to share that this is another project down in Stafford, which you can see like an orange line there. Basically, we haven't even got permitted yet, but the idea is functionally to stop the erosion at this point, because the whole marsh is going behind it. But then we would like to come back in with dredge material and mostly compost here, because the marsh here isn't nearly as bad as it is like up at Good Luck Point. So it's been nice to get through the state funds, through Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a tax on, companies, to get this money back. So just throwing that out briefly, but here's what that project could potentially look like with all of our little compost and filling some ditches. So just kind of figuring out next steps. But, you know, this is a 150-acre site. So that's a lot of salt marsh to potentially improve. And it isn't just to have great habitat and improve habitat for salt marsh sparrows, but you can see here there's some benefits to homeowners, although we know it's a tough area here, Beach Haven West. It really got hard hit. Parts of it did after the storm. So, but that's, you know, just to show you some other things we're working on. Another quickly, just showing you, I talked about black rails. This is actually a nice salt hay, Spartina Payton's marsh in the wintertime. Here is Dr. Joe Smith, and he is setting up an ARU, an automatic recording unit. And instead of sitting out in the marshes waiting for the rails to call, we now just put out these pieces of digital recording equipment and then bring them back to the lab. And we actually hired Georgetown University to sit on computers for days and weeks and months on end to find if they've heard any black rails. And Darlene, I know we are a strong advocate, but I will say others have tried volunteers and they're like, there's no way to hell we're doing that again.
They need better training then, because there's too many
so
examples of success.
painful.
Yeah, it takes time. It's incremental, but it'll work.
Yeah, so maybe
It
so.
works.
We could give it a try on this one.
Yeah.
So this just shows you, here is our wilderness area with our mostly undeveloped, the marsh on the left is grid ditch, but this marsh does not have grid ditches in it. And it's one of the most pristine marshes in probably on the East Coast, out there near the Mullica River. And so we went out and you can see here's black rail tracks up on the upper left. The black rail makes a little called a kiki cur. And so they make these sonograms and you can see the kiki cur. And then of course this gorgeous photo below is what the marsh looks like. And that just makes me so happy to see that. So having had all that data taken out there, we actually did get data. We had gone through a couple of years where there were nearly 0 detections of black rail in the state of New Jersey. And we knew they had to be out there, but there were people out there and black rails are very quiet. And so having these detectors out there, that was 2 summers ago now, you could see where we got some hits. Now, we don't know how many birds this is, you know, but this is the beginning again. For science, remember, you just got to start somewhere. You just got to lay the groundwork. And so you can see here that we have a couple of spots with some pretty significant number of calls. And, you know, the science will now kind of becoming like, okay, how many birds is it? And we'll just keep working on it. So we're really excited about this because most scientists are still saying, no, we can't use this kind of data. And, you know, this kind of data collection. We're like, no, this is the only way to go. And then just talking about beach, we do beach just like Ken does. And so, of course, you guys well know our wonderful Holgate unit. And one of the things I did want to mention is that we have obviously Holgate here and our little beach island to the farther south. But we have this new horseshoe island that's been created at south of the Little Egg Inlet. It's absolutely gorgeous. I just saw an aerial photo of it taken a couple weeks ago. It's doing amazingly well. It is an island. There are no predators on it. The birds are doing great. You know, piping plovers. This is a piping plover chick. We are not there yet on piping plovers nesting there, but because of Holgate Holgate has basically become our predominantly most important site in the state of New Jersey. You can see the number of pairs has increased since Hurricane Sandy. Our productivity, which is down here, the number of chicks per pair is not where we want it to be, but you can see we are fledging a decent amount of chicks, whereas years ago it was only, you know, 20 birds. And now to where we are is that we are essentially you know, having all the chicks. Little Beach is not doing great. You can see the gray line going down. And it's because habitat is changing. Whereas Holgate, after the Hurricane Sandy storms, there was huge overwashes. And so a lot of dune and marsh we had got covered with sand. And it got covered from sand all the way to the back bay. So here you have the birds just taking off. And so you can see the population. And then when you compare that to the state of New Jersey, here on the left, the percentage of the New Jersey population, you know, you can see that green line is Forsythe, and we're almost 50% of the whole state of New Jersey. And that's pretty remarkable. And it's terrifying because that habitat is not going to stay great. It's going to keep changing. And then what happens? We are always at Holgate. We love migratory birds. You can come see our cruise starting around Memorial Day down there. And I know I see Mary Jane on, and I know Mary Jane helps us out a lot. Well, I'm sure we'll be doing our Holgate walks again. And then here is that most recent picture of Horseshoe Island, which you can just see. This is a little different angle. This is looking straight west at Little Beach Island, but it just is amazing, and it's pretty gorgeous. And it's become really, really important for red knots, which is one of our other federally listed species, and they are absolutely hanging out on the island after they've bred up in the Arctic, and they're going all the way down to Tierra del Fuego, and they're staying for weeks on Horseshoe Island. In addition to Horseshoe Island, for them, the royal terns, this is a bird we see a lot in New Jersey, and it nests, but now 450 pairs of royal terns are nesting on Horseshoe Island, and that is astounding. That is unbelievable. We've never had this. It is the farthest north breeding colony of royal tern in the country, probably the world. Also, we have oyster catchers. Just had to share a couple cute shots. Here's an American oyster catcher, and here's a fun video of skimmers. We put some cams on our skimmers, and so here's a fun video. Let's see. Oh, I don't know if the sound is going to work. Did I share sound? I know we're running up against the clock. It might automatically do that now. So let me try that.
And we do try and honor the clock. However, when things are really interesting like this, and if you'll go a few more minutes, I'm sure
I'll go.
The audience would be happy to stay.
Let me just see if you all
don't worry too much about clock.
Okay, let me just show this. So this was last August. And I'll just pause it to tell you, those are all the royal terns in the back, and this is all the skimmers in the front. And so it just shows you how incredible it is out there on the island. Isn't that the best? Just love that stuff. That was just a wildlife camera that the wildlife biologists put out there. We work with the state. Now, I am going to beg you to give me 3 more minutes to talk about bird collisions, because this is the area where I think all of us can make a difference. So since 1970, there was a big research project that came out right before COVID, and we learned that 3 billion birds have died since 1970 in North America. And that is obviously a big concern to the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. And what we see is that when you look at the data, it's largely passerines or songbirds. Doesn't mean everything. I've seen rails that have hit windows and died. But we might want to blame it on these high-rise buildings, right? But it's actually mostly in buildings like our homes, 1 or 2 story homes. And if I bet you if you were in a room and I asked you all to raise your hand have you had a bird hit your house, you would, almost everyone would say, yep. And so what we know is that, like I said, half of the homes, as a matter of fact, what they say is that every day, on average, if you took all the window collisions of birds hitting windows on homes, it would be two birds a day in America for every home. I mean, it's vast. So American Bird Conservancy, I'm going to ask for you to check on that. I do have actually little cards I can give out when we're together. But the reflections confuse birds, and this is why. So this is what birds see, right? And I know you would probably know, a lot of you know this, but the idea is, how do you get this to stop? And what you need to do is 2 very critical things. One is that if you're going to put anything on your windows to stop birds from colliding, it has to be outside. Closing your curtains, putting up hangers in front of the window, but in your dining room, absolutely won't work. You have to put something outside to break up that pattern. And also turning your lights off at night, inside and outside your house, really helps, because then birds aren't focusing on lights when they're migrating. And also with lights, bugs are attracted to light. And then the birds are attracted to the bugs. And then they sort of get confused and kind of trapped in their own cycle. So at the refuge office, I would love for you all to come visit us over in Galloway, but we've actually put up and demonstrated a variety of things you can put on your windows to help reduce bird collisions. And so you can see here, upper left here, this is an outside screen. Of course, if you're at your house and you have screens outside your house, you're in good shape. You're pretty much there. For instance, I have French doors. I'm looking at them right now. And sometimes years ago, I would keep like the one screen open, but the glass door, the left one was glass. Well, then a northern parula warbler hit my window. And I'm like, well, crap. So let's keep those screens closed. And now the birds at least bump off of them if they hit it at all. Here you have vertical stripes. Here you have the dots. And then here you actually have bird savers. The company makes these and they're called it's parachute cord. Fundamentally, what you want is you want it to be to where a bird either can't see the window reflection, or if it sees it, you have a 2-inch gap, because not a bird isn't going to fly through something that its wings can't get through. So you got to have the 2 inches. This is why you see this grid. That's why these vertical stripes are actually 2 inches apart, and also with the parachute cord. So this just goes in, and I'm going to skip through these, but this just dives in deeper to what these look like. We sell the dots and the stripes here at the store, but you can go online. And so what I would ask you again, and you could even paint your windows outside, turning lights off at night. So what I would ask you is to go on the American Birds and Conservancy. This is my last slide. Go on the Bird Conservancy website and look up bird collisions. And there is a plethora of information that you can do to help reduce the impacts. And of course, here are other things you can do to help save birds. And I'm going to beg you to, you don't have to do it on every window on your house, but maybe you got that 1 or 2 windows, right? That are seen for whatever reason, the way the light hits it, time of day. So I'd really ask you to think about, other than keeping your cats indoors, to protect your birds by covering your windows. And that's
great.
So I'm going to stop now.
We do, and that's great. And we do have a couple of questions, and we do encourage people to come out to the foundation's website, because we post not only your presentation, but then any links. So these are some really, some very useful links. And got a couple questions. One went back, they were asking about horseshoe crabs and wondering, are the horseshoe crabs breeding
let's see that.
Horseshoe Island, not
right.
Words.
Yeah, I would say not so much. It's not, I think some come ashore, and just like we see them kind of on Holgate, they're out there a little bit, but it's, it's really the Bayside, Delaware Bay, and other bays. So I would say not in a way that we would be super concerned, but obviously still want to protect the habitat.
Great. Okay. And another, Darlene, you mentioned this, that there are 5,000 observations of red knots per the iNaturalist website. And then she provided the link out to that.
Yeah. And where you could find up-to-date information from, at least for volunteer and sometimes scientists who are sharing their observations of what they see. It's research grade level data that's used. iNaturalist is the largest provider. Free app. Many of you know this because we talked about it in past weeks. That's actually where you can also see where horseshoes have been documented and see their changing populations over time too.
Good. And then Darlene also provided a link out to the Foundation's website. So you go to Foundation's website, go to science, go to the speaker, and there you've got it. And then there was a question about talking about bird strikes. Any, I guess, information you have on the evaluation of the impact of the wind turbines and bird strikes? Do you have some of that? I would imagine you've got some of that.
Well, I'm not involved with the studies that are being conducted. And I think, whatever, the folks that are doing that and have whatever they've made public is public and gettable. I don't get involved with that particularly because I'm a refuge manager. So I'm more worried about the impacts to the refuge from the turbines, and also, because we actually get into a little bit more in the weeds on it for us because we have wilderness area. So we
Right.
actually have to assess the potential impacts to the wilderness area. And for us, it's been kind of more going in the direction of air quality rather than, studying. There's a whole other migratory birds division in the Fish and Wildlife Service, and that's what they're, furiously studying and understanding. The good news is because of that, because of the, potential impacts, we have to understand what is going on or what would go on. There's a lot more research going on and has been for 10 years now, with understanding where birds are moving. There's so much more tagging of birds. We know so much more than we knew so that we can hopefully be informing decisions to, as much as possible to reduce impacts. But I actually don't have information about studies or what, what's going on with, I really don't know exactly. All I would say is that because the projects are, actually government projects, right? So it's the BOEM folks that are putting in these towers. So it's their, they have to do EISs, and I know folks have seen those and they're reading those, and those are, we as an agency review those and provide our input as well. And so that's kind of where it goes for us. But
I just dropped a link from the Department of Energy.
oh, super.
It has a whole bunch of.
Yeah, and I think it's really a good point because, as I said in the introduction, what we're mainly trying to do is to help people find good sources for information so they can cite those sources. And I hadn't really thought about what you were just saying is that probably linking to national wildlife and to the
Division of Migratory Birds is the one that's going to have whatever they have released. I'm certain is out there. It's just, it would be a matter of finding it.
Right. So division of, I guess, would it be division of, it would be national, it would be, what website would we look for there?
Well, if I would say, it's U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Division of Migratory Birds.
Yeah,
that's what I was, I think that would be where to start, see what they have out there and maybe kind of start with that piece to sort of get down to what's available and to maybe who to contact to get more information if you're looking for some.
That's great. Okay. And I think we have covered all of our questions, and look at this. It's just precisely noon. That's fantastic. Well, I certainly want to thank you. And that hour went really fast. You really, this is some really great information and things that I think people haven't thought that much about that's going on at Forsythe. So I'm very pleased. I really appreciate you taking your time. I know you're overworked and understaffed, so I really do appreciate taking your Saturday morning to be with us. We have 2 more Science Saturdays, by the way. Next week, we're going to be hearing from a fellow who is doing some tremendous research and actually implementing some habitat revival, I guess I would call it. And he'll be here next week, and then the following week we'll be having a talk by Sam Gordon, who is an architect. He lives in Barnegat Lake, I think it's Barnegat Lake or High Bar, and has built a number of houses on LBI. Very familiar with our conditions, and he's going to give us some insight into things that we could be doing in our own homes, and also be looking to in new housing development or major renovations, those kinds of things. So those are our last 2. And again, I really appreciate your time, Virginia, this morning. And you get an A plus, because there are more people on the call at the end instead of 2 people. So that's how I gauge the performance. And
well, I will add, since I still
have
have a mic, that you could talk to the architect about using glass that reduces collisions of birds.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about light pollution and the problems with that. And so everything is connected. And I really, again, there's
a lot of nice comments in chat if you can't see them, Virginia. So everybody.
I see them. Thank you all. It's been fun.
Yeah, great.
All righty. Okay, well, see you all next week. Have a wonderful week, and thanks again. Bye-bye.
You wanna
Thank
take
you.
care. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. It was great.
You got it.